Hello, everyone, and welcome to Preflight's deep dive session. Preflight is a community of onboarding, implementation, and CS and PS folks. So we have folks across the post-sales spectrum, and today we'll be talking about PLG. I'll give you a quick definition and then move on to introductions, and then we'll jump right in. I think for me, I'm going to define what PLG means to me and what I've come across in the community when I've tried to discuss it with people in the post-sales org that have a PLG motion, right? They've always said that product-led companies prioritize time to value. That's the first thing that I've heard everywhere. And they try to create an aha moment early in the customer journey, actually, and that's how they get to the value faster. And PLG is when a product is the primary driver for acquiring and retaining customers. And this strategy, it can be called more than a strategy, but it typically involves making the product the centerpiece of the customer experience and using that to drive the user engagement and growth. Think of it as a top of the funnel driving your sales and then driving your retention. So it's a pleasure to introduce to you all the incredible panel of experts we have today. We have Aaron Lanclos, the VP of Customer Success at Own Backup. We have Dicky Singh, who's the CEO and co-founder of Cast App. And we have Joe Shukla, who's the author and director. She runs her own consulting firm for CX and digital transformation. So welcome, Aaron, Dicky, and Joe. So great to have you here. Thank you for doing this with us. And we'll just start by knowing a little bit more about your journey so far, and then we'll jump right into PLG.
Perfect. Thank you, Usha. I'll start off and then hand it over maybe to you, Joe. But Aaron Lanclos here. Nice to be invited to this panel, and hopefully we can add some value to the group today. I've been in customer success, I would say, for about 20 years of my career, before customer success was cool and before the SaaS market was SaaS, taking care of anything from large customers in a paid-for model all the way through creating digital content and kind of this PLG motion. So I have a lot of experience, mostly in data management and IT software. Did a little bit of a stint in life sciences industry as well, and had some software that helped develop some of our COVID vaccines. So that was an interesting moment in my career. But over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all. My name is Joe Shukla. I'm joining you from Sydney, Australia today. So I'm the author of a book called Customer Success Mindset, and I decided to write that book because I am obsessed with the concept of customer success. My background is I started my career in IT service delivery around 13 years ago. And then I moved into customer success. And I think, like I said, I've been obsessed with it ever since. After writing my book, I started my consulting journey last year. So now I consult with large financial organizations, healthcare companies, and startups to help with internal change management to enable more outcomes for their customers, better customer experience, and product-led growth. So I think the topic today is very close to the work that I do and my passion in general. And I look forward to having a fruitful discussion with everyone here today. Over to you, Dicky.
Thank you so much, Usha, Aaron, and Joe. Yeah, my name is Dicky Singh, and then I've been involved with customer-facing products for over 20 years, and customer satisfaction, overall satisfaction. So every time Steve Jobs went up the stage and said that Apple has 98% customer satisfaction, that was a product that I created, right? So at a company called Customer Sat. But today I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Cast App, and it's an automation platform to drive growth and revenue from existing customers without expanding teams. So we automate things that matter the most to both customer success and revenue leaders, which is growth, revenue, and referrals. And we'll talk more about that. And growth is like driving usage, usefulness, and adoption of products customers are paying for, leading into no-brainer renewals, upsells, cross-sells, and referrals. And I'm so glad to be here to talk about two of my favorite topics, digital CS and PLG.
Thank you, everyone, for the great introductions. I think we can get started. I started with what PLG means to me, how I understand it. So I think we can get started with how you all understand PLG and what digital customer success means to you all from all the experience that you've had over the years.
I can give it a shot. PLG to me is where the usage of the product drives almost everything else. And by everything else, I mean like, new customer acquisition, usage of the product itself, the adoption, the retention, the renewals, and the expansion. So key to that is the product should be useful and easy for the end user, right? And not easy for the CS leader or not easy for the CIO or so. It should be like easy for the end user. And that inherently brings down the adoption and usage. And there has to be some level of freemium model to it, as well as like virality. So when users use it, other users see their work and they get to use it more. So everything is based out of the usage of the product.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dickie. And I think for me, the product-led growth is everything driven from the product perspective, like you mentioned, to drive outcomes for the customers. And to me, it really starts with coordinated communications. So everything that your company is doing in front of the customer to drive that customer experience needs to be coordinated. And whether that's directly through the product or somehow indirectly related through some kind of product kind of journey or expansion, that experience has to be cohesive and consistent throughout that entire customer journey. And I think that's where it starts for me, is looking at it from that product perspective, and how do you drive everything from onboarding and adoption to expansion all the way, through your product, but also let customers be part of something larger, be part of the community. And when I say that, I mean kind of that capital community where I'm talking about interact with other peers through the product. How do we enable that? How do we let customers actually manage their environment and their own profiles and personas of what they want to see in the product? And it becomes that customized experience to that product that leads them back to wanting more out of your product. And that's going to lead to adoption and expansion, obviously, through different product sets, through cross-sell and upsell opportunities. So for me, it's that same mindset, but making sure that you enable that journey holistically throughout the product. So Joe, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think absolutely agreeing with you both and not trying to repeat what everyone said here. Absolutely agree with the discussion, the definition here. I think that one of the misconceptions that's floating around in the market is that PLG is only for companies that would offer freemium trials or a trial subscription sort of model. But I think that the definition and best practices that a product-led growth model gives us are equally applicable to companies selling enterprise applications to their customers. And that's why it's so important. I think I've had conversations with peers in the industry before where PLG and customer-led growth are sort of as a chicken and egg situation. What comes first? What came first? What should happen first? My view on that is that the product always comes first. So PLG comes first, but when you complement it with a product, with a customer-led growth model, it enables this continuous loop internally within your organizations and helps you connect with your customers better through better data, better metrics, just better everything, a better experience for your customers. And that drives outcomes, not just for your customers, but for your company as well, in terms of, an increased user base, an expanded user base, more referrals, expansion opportunities, and all of that.
And just to add one more thing, we are looking at the broader definition of product, not just like a mobile app or a web app. Facebook or Meta would describe you as the product, right? Because it's like free. So, and so don't think of like product as something where we do monthly active users going to a SaaS application or monthly active users on a mobile application. Even if you take content and send it to the inbox of a customer or the inbox in their text inbox, you are making you're taking your product to them. You can bring them into your product, or you can take them to your product. So we are looking at the broader definition of product over here.
Yeah, and I'll expand on that and say, in today's economy, obviously everyone's looking at how do we do this? How do we do this customer experience and this product-led growth at scale? And that's really where the challenge comes in, because in my world at Own Backup, we don't have a freemium kind of service. we have trials and we have human-led approaches to that. But once you get in the product, it's what's that first experience look like? And that first experience, whether it's through a product or a human touch, or it's a first training element, all of those things need to be evaluated for how does that fit into our overall strategy of product-led growth, and how does that fit into the overall customer journey? Because if you have a poor first experience, that actually starts that whole relationship on a let's call it sour note, and you're going to limit yourself on what the product can handle. And one thing that I'll point out is if you're going through the motions of asking yourself, hey, how much, do I need to enable customers more through a lot of training or follow these training modules, and then you're enabled in the product. For me, it's looking at the product itself, saying, is the product ready? And every product's different. I'm not going to, debate that, obviously, and you have to understand the complexity of your product, but enable the product itself to be simple where it needs to be simple, and where you need human elements, let's make sure those are scaled efficiently as well. So I think that's very important in my world.
Absolutely. And I think, Aaron, you bring up a very good point. I think most companies, when they look at enabling a digital-led model for customer success into their product-led growth model, end up doing digitization, but it's often done with the right intentions, but done in the wrong way. And that leads to what I've, in my experience, very generic outreach to customers, outreach that doesn't speak to them and eventually becomes invaluable. I've personally experienced that with a lot of the products that I use, where the intent is right, but the communication, no matter what the method of outreach be, is so generic that it doesn't speak to the customer. So I think that one of the things, and it's not that hard to do, and we'll deep dive into it as we progress this discussion, is that how do you enable a digitally led, human supported model where people can talk to a human if they need to? Because sometimes, we need to talk to a human being, and automation doesn't do everything for you. Also remembering that the human brain is behind all the automation. That's what drives the automation. So how do you make it a digitally led but human first approach?
I couldn't agree more. And we're going through that at its own backup right now through that digital transformation. And that's part of the role that I've taken on, is to actually help that transformation. So I'm glad you brought it up. I know we'll dive deeper into some of those and what specifics that I can talk about, some of the specifics that we're looking at doing to help enable that journey as well.
And yeah, in the older days, we had salespeople knocking on doors and selling stuff, right? We don't do that anymore. We advertise, and when the customer sees an advertisement, they come to us, right? So the same approach can be taken with digital CS, right? You inform the users of, you share insights, you share data individually, you'd say different things to a C-level executive, a different thing to an operator, and a different thing to maybe a power user. And when they have questions or something, they can click a button and you can directly set up like Calendly to talk to a customer success manager, talk to a VP, or talk to the C-level exec, whoever they want. So I think the same approach, you communicate with customers and they can see this on their own time, and then they come back to you. So we are all in super agreement. I was hoping that we will argue a little bit, but not yet. So.
Well, Vicky, you bring up a good point. Something, getting a little bit specific here, something that we're working on, that own backup, that I think really relates to what you're talking about, is how do we stay personalized but at scale, number one, but specifically around working with products and getting product feedback back to our product teams. So that becomes even a product-led growth strategy, or part of that overall strategy. And today we capture it one-on-one with CSMs, and it was a very human element. And we're trying to do it at scale, again, building things like a community. Maybe you have upvoting and things like that, but something that's very important to me as I talk to customers is, how do we close that loop? And I think no matter what product-led growth aspect you're talking about, you have to be able to close that loop. And again, I'll use the word, make customers feel like they're part of something larger, because they want to feel like they're contributing not only to the product itself, but to the company as a whole, and helping through that digital transformation with you. And customers are more than willing to meet their peers to talk about some of these ideas and actually share some of that. So for us, that product feedback, that upvoting, that closing the loop. And again, even if you have that human element, Vicky, and say, hey, we're talking or chatting with someone that has a great idea, and we have to have a way to capture that. We have to have a way to prioritize that with our product teams. And most importantly, again, in my book, have a way to close that loop and share back to that customer base, based on your feedback. Here's what we're going to do, and here's how the priorities we're going to implement based on your feedback. And I think that's very important to get them, again, talking about being part of something larger.
Super exciting what you, sorry.
Go ahead, Dickie.
Super exciting what you're saying, like, closing the loop is key. So I'll take it a step further. Even if you do not agree with what the customer is saying, you still need to tell them why you're not going to do that or what they do. And maybe you are wrong. Maybe the customer will, at that point, when you're taking the feedback back to them and give you a use case where it makes sense to do that, right? So always never ghost your customers, right? Always tell them, why you're going to do something and when you're going to do it, how long it will take you to do it, or why you're not going to do something. I think that I've learned that from experience, especially, helping customers like Google, Yahoo, Apple. Like, you have to always tell them why you're not, and they respect that. They know, and it's okay. Yeah, what if we pay you extra? Will you do that? Things like that come out of that very quickly.
I love that. I think I always say that in our profession, there's no no, there is always a no but. And that's how we answer our customers. So I think that customer success professionals obviously have learned the art of saying no, but this is not about that. I think this, back to your points, Aaron and Dickie, I think this is about, one, how do we get started on an effective digital customer success strategy? And two, back to your point, Aaron, how do we enable that constant feedback loops? In my work that I've done with several organizations, I've come to notice that there's really golden nuggets of customer feedback beyond just NPS, beyond just interactions with customer success managers. I think what companies need to be able to do effectively, to do this more effectively, is enable different teams to share that feedback from customers into a centralized location that not only gets delivered to product, but also enables a conversation, not just with customers, internally as well. So one of the companies that I was working with, their salespeople got a lot of good customer feedback about the product from their failed deals. And that feedback, when put together, if it were put together, would lead to a lot of good transformation for the product. When you're doing the same thing with customers, through your customer success or marketing teams or whoever's interacting with the customer, two things could happen. One is, obviously, it add good feedback for your product, or good product ideas would lead to a good roadmap, enhancements for your product. Any customers who have the wrong expectation of your product and expect something that you don't do or isn't the vision for your company, is a chance to educate them as to how they could not only have the right expectations, but also use your product better for what it's meant to do and not think about things that it's not meant to do. So I think either way, it's a win-win. It's internally, the leadership team should be responsible for how to enable that feedback to come in from different teams. What part of it then gets discussed with the product team, and how much do we discuss and brainstorm with your customers?
Yeah, and then whatever feedback you get, you ask other customers, like, who haven't provided the feedback, to see if that's useful to them. Make all your mistakes on paper napkins, right? Because it's a lot cheaper to make those mistakes on paper napkins. So yeah, communicate with the customers, get feedback, ask other customers what they feel, and then implement into the product. So.
And how does that, most importantly, making sure that that feedback doesn't go into a loophole, it goes somewhere, not just to enable good things for your product and but also for your customer outcomes. So how do you feed that back into the enablement strategy or digital customer success strategy, your strategy for helping customers achieve that outcome? That should be the end goal. That's what really closes the loop. Where does it go? What do we do with it? What did we get out of it? And that would help you with more buy-in from your board, your leadership, get more budget, etc., for more software as you're progressing.
So Aaron, you mentioned like upwards and downwards kind of thing, right? So say a little bit more about this, because I personally hate it. Why? Because only the top few things get implemented, and everything else that's so useful gets thrown away, right? So say more about what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, no, I think it's up for debate, and I've had those same conversations with many people. A lot of people don't like upvote, downvotes. I think number one, it depends on the product and the complexity of the product. Number two, it depends on the number of customers, and it obviously starts back with even that customer journey and segmenting your customers into what really makes the most sense for that segment of customers. So for us at Own Backup, we will have the option for our, let's call it SMB customers, to have a say through upvote, cross-vote, and really even through the community to be able to peer network to say what's working for them. And to Joe, I think you mentioned it, sometimes the answer is no, we're not going to do it. And the reason we're not going to do it is there's a better way to do it, or there's an alternative way to do it that gets to the same outcome. So someone who wants it blue, we have to understand, do we go from red to green to blue, or just can we go from red to blue? And a lot of times it's the same outcome. And we have to understand that journey and ask a few more questions. I'm a big believer in a customer community where you can have those open dialogue and discussions. But if you implement that at your company, number one, it has to be very interactive and it has to be very meaningful. You have to come back and close the loop and say, what do these votes mean? To your point, Dickie, if they're not going to do anything or mean anything, then what's the point of voting? And number two, allow customers that have great ideas that don't necessarily get upvoted to have a say in some other forum, whether that's through customer advisory boards where you can actually have open dialogue at a round table. I like having those type of discussions. We invite a lot of customers back to our corporate headquarters and have customer days where we actually can debate some of this and say, help us decide what the future of our product is, and let's have positive disagreement, if you want to think of it that way, to help influence our product long term. And again, that all leads to the product-led growth strategy over time. So it's a mix for me to answer your question, and I think it depends on your overall strategy, your product, and the segments that you have in your customer base.
And there was an HBR study talking about like customers who open the most tickets, like influence the product the most, right? So, and we all know that, yes, the number of tickets during onboarding should be at a certain number and they should start dropping after that. That means the person has adopted the product, right? So those are the kind of things that are, but I still think like, there are a few people who will never complain, never upvote or downvote, and they'll just leave, right? So how do we get them into the mix is what I'm usually concerned about, so.
I really love that point, Dickie, because there's always a focus on being on clean and green customers. We often forget the quiet ones who are very important, not just as customers because we want to retain them, but also they might have golden nuggets of feedback that we miss because there's other noise there. So back to your point, Aaron, I think I have a love-hate relationship with upvoting and downvoting. I love it because it gives you great feedback. I hate it because it tends to create a lot of noise. So I think it's how do you filter out the noise? How do you build a strategy to filter out the noise and listen to customers who aren't talking as much as the ones who are making noise? That's very important.
And my theory is like, if you're already doing, digital is usually thought of like one-to-many, but when you start personalizing it, you can make digital one-on-one, right? Like you're personalizing it for the power user, you're personalizing it for the CEO exec. So you could ask those questions personally, right? And then you can collect that, because a lot of people would give you the feedback one-on-one versus as not maybe in a group, right? And then you can aggregate those questions and match it to the people who, I guess, upvoted a lot or so, and then decide what to do. Well, yeah, it's not clear to me. I'm still looking for like good answers around that. So.
Yeah, I think for me too, and you mentioned a good point, Dickie, is you have to think about what's in it for the customer when you think about this product-led strategy, because it's great for the company, obviously, and you want product-led growth, the efficiencies and all the studies have been done. But for me, I sit down and spend a lot of time thinking about it. What's in it for the customers, and everything that we do as part of that product growth strategy. What are the customers' benefits out of it? Whether it's additional training benefits, whether it's a peer networking, because in today's world, to our points, especially with COVID, people want to interact with other people. They want a peer network. They want to maybe advance their next career or get on calls like this and really talk about what is the industry doing and share that kind of common knowledge. So I think all of that is very important. And I think that in itself can be enabled through the product that, if we think about it, whether the product is part of leading into a community, whether you talk about in product, you have user personas and profiles that customers have to self-manage. Number one, that's very scalable. Number two, you can start matching up those profiles and personas. And again, customers want to feel like it's part of something larger. And I think that for me is just so key right now, coming off of COVID and coming off of a younger generation of talent out there that grew up kind of on the digital world where they're self-help and they want that self-help knowledge, but to enable that next level and to get real world experience takes some human interaction. And I think for some people, it's a little bit uncomfortable that you have to pull them out of their shell and get them to engage, whether it's through the product or even in person.
I think great. I just have something to add. The great points, Aaron, Dickie, and Joe on feedback. So now, are we differentiating between the post-sales feedback that comes from your customers because you also need to feed into your product the pre-sale feedback that you have, because your sales is being powered by your product, right? And how do you do that when there's so much uncertainty over your customer journeys in the PLG model? So I think we need to touch upon that. And yeah, please.
Yeah, what you're touching upon is being able to differentiate between the buyer journeys and the customer journeys, right? Buyer journey being before they become a customer. And then we talk about like onboarding is when they've just become a customer, right? But if you look into it, there's something called pre-boarding, which is when they're about to become a customer. You need to start communicating with, like, let's say maybe the 80% chance of a customer closing. You need to start talking to them. So like, hey, look, the CS team is like so excited to like work with you. And here are the things that you would do once you become a customer, like, you know, call it like pre-onboarding or pre-boarding or any of those kind of things. But the feedback you want is from your existing customers. Give it a weightage. You want feedback from those like people who are at the last leg, and also people who did not use you because they thought that some features were missing or some products were missing, or they have a cheaper version, way to like do certain things, right? So yeah, all that feedback is necessary. I mean, and should be incorporated into your big picture of things.
Absolutely. I think it goes back to something I just said earlier, where feedback from sales on deals that fell through and did not happen can sometimes be golden nuggets of information to improve your existing customer journey and to improve your product. So I think salespeople usually they feel left out when it comes to the customer journey and feedback mechanisms, because it's all related to what we now term as post sales. I think that, you know, this is where we need to blur the lines and encourage and welcome feedback from customers who couldn't be our customers, where deals fell through, or customers, like Gary said in the chat, they don't believe that they should need to talk to us. Quiet customers who don't make a lot of noise, and sales deals that do not work, do not happen, are lost to competitors, or just end up being that, you know, this product doesn't work for us. There's a lot of feedback that comes from those little conversations. It's how you capture it, how you use it, and how you enable. I keep saying that customers, and it's something that we all keep saying in the customer success industry, customer success is not the responsibility of just the customer success department. I think product buys in on it, marketing buys in on it. Sometimes what's left out is the sales org, because they're so busy hunting and we're so busy farming. How do we incorporate sales feedback from customers who couldn't, or from our prospects, or from salespeople in general into our product and customer success strategy? I think is something that the industry needs to start doing better in general.
Yep,
makes a lot of sense.
I agree 100%. And I'm seeing a lot of talk in the chat as well from everyone, Gary and Ellen there, about understanding what's important to customers and understanding, as well as what, you know, some people want to talk to us. Some customers want to talk live to a human, some people don't. And we're trying to balance that right now at Own Backup as well, trying to ensure that customers have the right means and method to be able to communicate with us. And again, it starts, Dicky, to your point, with the pre-sales or pre-onboarding, and communication is key. Again, when I call coordinated communications, from that handoff from a pre-sales motion to your CSM team or the implementation team, and understanding what those expectations are, reiterating those expectations from the buyer journey to the customer journey. That's very crucial, and really setting up both short and long-term success plans. And that's, for us, that's very important. And being able to track what success looks like to them. And sometimes it's a financial aspect and what that value is, and being able to capture that and be able to deliver continuous value to those customers on an ongoing basis. And again, through the means for which they want it. Sometimes that's digital, sometimes that's human. And again, being able to enable both for different segments of your customer base is hard. And you have to have that fine balance to be able to do it.
And I can, what we used to do is like profile the customer. So for an example, a customer like Apple would never talk about their stuff on a community, right? They would talk a lot privately. They will give so many suggestions and all, but they never. But Yahoo on the other side would not talk privately at all. They will like put so many things. They want people to be known. Hey, this is this guy from Architect from Yahoo asked this question, so everyone should upvote it, right? So different profiles, different customers, but you have to work with both. Is the key. So.
So Joe, Joe, if I can ask you, how would you get started in building kind of this customer led growth strategy, or product led growth strategy, sorry, and what are some tactical things that you would call out to say these are things we can accomplish right away?
I think that I'm a huge fan of starting simple. It's also because I do a lot of work with startups who don't have a lot of budget often for, fancy software, complicated software. How do we start simple with the things that we've got? So I think 3 things that would go into complementing your product-led growth strategy with a customer-led growth model is things you've probably done already, mapping out your customer journey. How do you build that into your digital strategy? So think about this, the journey of your end users, how can you guide them towards their outcome? So things like self-serve onboarding, could be a series of emails that's very simple to do, doesn't require huge technology investment. If the model works for you, we've seen automated renewals happening where in not so complicated situations. And I think with personalized messaging, one of the things that we've done in the past, and this works really well for both the digital-led customer success, a digital customer success model, and where you've got huge books of accounts for CSMs where they're managing many accounts at the same time. You record a video. It ties into some of the work that Dickie is doing as well. You record a video, it's personalized, but you only send it to those customers that the video is relevant to. It takes 5, it doesn't have to be longer than 2 minutes, shouldn't take more than 10 minutes to record, but you plan your outreach to customers in a way that it makes sense to them, but also in a way that speaks to them and gets them to respond to you. I've had a lot of those quiet, silent customers that wouldn't do a lot of talking, don't have a lot of time, always watching those videos because we get those stats, even if they don't respond to us. So I think there's ways to gauge and measure communication in a scaled model while keeping it simple. It doesn't have to be very complicated. So I think starting simple, looking at 3 things that I'd keep in mind is your customer journey, your account segmentation strategy, and the way that you're capturing customer usage data. If you start by incorporating these 3 factors into how you're scaling your customer success program, it's a great starting point.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, Dickie.
go ahead. So I was just going to add that reaching out through like video, it's 6.5 times more effective than sending some text, right? People retain like 6.5 times, right? But it doesn't scale that well. I mean, like if you have like a PLG motion, chances are you have like $8 per seat per month, and you'll have a lot of customers. You cannot send that to so many, and that's why people look at like automation products. But the other thing I've heard is a lot of folks that use Bonbon and like tools like this to record, they give up after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, right? Because they cannot keep doing it perpetually, right? But yes, video-based presentations, they make a huge difference, right? But and you said something like keep it like 2 minutes. That's the right number. Like we try to keep it 90 seconds, and then we put a break where we ask the user what else they want to know. If you don't ask the user, after 3 minutes or 4 minutes, they drop off. But if you ask the user what else they want to know after 90 seconds, they will watch for like 8 minutes, 9 minutes straight. Why? Because they interacted with your video platform and like you asked them what else they want to know. But again, anything visual is 60,000 times better than like sending a piece of text that people have to parse and understand and read, kind of thing. So
it's funny that you mentioned that, Dickie, and we're going through some of that transformation as well. My motto as I go through customer success as part of this is personal, proactive, and predictive, right? That's where we want to get to. And we've had some, let's call it automations through our product, et cetera, that said, hey, by the way, you're at 95% storage usage, right? Whatever that metric is. And if you really think about it from that perspective, it's 95% good or bad, because some people will be like, hey, that's great because I'm fully utilized and I stay there and I love to be there. I actually get bonused if I'm fully utilized above 95%. And I've been there for 3 years. I'm not growing, I'm not shrinking. It's just where I've been. And other customers like, hey, that's great. And they need to buy more product or whatever it is. So what we've started doing is doing a lot more trending of that data and becoming more relative to that customer. So for example, if they're growing at 5% a month and they have 20% left, you can send a video or you can send a nice graph that says, by the way, proactively, you're going to be out of storage, you're going to be out of users in 4 months. And that gives them a little bit more, you're not really trying to sell if you think about it, you're actually trying to do them a favor saying, we don't want this to cut off on you, or we don't want bad things to happen. But internally, we're saying we're going to sell you more licenses because we don't want that
Yeah.
bad thing to happen. And we become that trusted advisor as part of that. So I think trending and becoming more personal is very important to your point. And whether I think the visual aspect is has made a huge difference for us, and we're continuing to invest in that as well.
We do the exact same thing what you just described for Pure Storage, right? Pure Storage is very similar. Like you're doing backup data, they're doing like SSD or whatever, right? So
Yep.
they're talking. We show the trend lines, like how we say like in 3 months you'll run out of this, and they say like, hey, if you want to buy it before the end of the year, you get a 5% discount. So all those things that they are baking into their communications. The other thing that really works well is benchmarking without using the term benchmarking to your customers. Like, you very quickly, you could say that obviously you need to do a very good customer segmentation for this to make sense. Like you would say, customers your size are using 14 features. You're only using 10. Do you want to talk to a customer success manager to learn how you are? So, this is like a totally gamified system using benchmarking and all this stuff. And we get like 97% click-throughs versus as 4% when you just announce the product, for example, right? Because you compared them. You do renewals without using the word renewals. You do upsells without using the word upsells. You do benchmarking without using the word benchmarking, right? So.
Yeah, someone mentioned using FOMO is very impactful. That's true.
Yeah.
People don't want to miss out in today's world, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
That's a natural growth. Ellen did have a question in the Q&A. I'll go ahead and ask it if that's okay. And Joe, maybe I'll throw it over to you. Do you feel there are major differences in how CS operates in PLG-led org versus a sales-led org?
There are, there shouldn't be, but there are. I think when we're working with a product-led growth model, the product is at front and center, and that's what drives the feedback loop. That's everything that we've been discussing so far. In a sales-led org, unfortunately, there ends up being, not discussing the mathematics and the mechanics of it, but I think there ends up being a lot of pressure on CSMs to upsell and cross-sell without the outcome bit. Like I said, it shouldn't be the case. Unfortunately, it is. And I think that's why I keep saying that companies think that they have to follow a product or sales or customer-led growth model at certain points in their journey. There is no reason why they have to do one versus the other in a certain stage of their business journey. All these models complement each other. They can coexist. It's finding the right balance and what works for you and for your customers. That's what should be happening. But like I said, unfortunately, that's not the case in the industry.
Yeah.
And that's the education piece we had to take up.
Yeah, and product is at the center, but even like, if you take some good example companies of PLG, like what comes to mind, like Slack, Datadog, and like all these companies, all of them also have sales teams, right? It's not that like, they're not utilizing sales teams. And there's a very good article by Growth Plus Sales. I'm going to just see if I can paste it over here from A16Z that kind of talks about like, even if you're doing PLG, at some point in your stage, you have to bring in like sales. Like, and it talks about like resonance, right? Sometimes if you're like going in a wave PLG, this SLG can cancel it out. But what you want to do is so it resonates and like picks up the SLG and the PLG kind of together. So very important. And again, the word SLG or community-led growth or customer-led growth or human-led growth, they didn't exist. These phrases did not exist before the word PLG, right? Once we came with product-led growth, all these, people, oh, but what about human-led growth? What about customer? All these terms started to like come in effect. But PLG is not the opposite of SLG, right? Sales does get involved. The only difference is the product is providing the PQLs or the qualified leads, if I may, directly in the product versus as having to go outside the system. So,
I'll comment on that too. And you bring up a good point, Vicky, on, again, I'll go back to the word that I use, coordinated communications, because if you have your sales team saying one thing or trying to sell product A, and then in the product, you're really pushing product B, you're all over the place as a company and you're getting nothing but noise, quite frankly, and people get distracted with that. And quite frankly, they'll start ignoring everything. So I think that coordinated communication plan is very key and strategic. And for us, I know we've started to pick, let's call it coordinated topics on a quarterly basis and say, hey, in all of Q1, we're going to focus on really these two items. And we're in product, whether it's through in-app messaging and Findo or something of that nature. And then through the marketing websites, we're going to have surveys around that same product. And then we're going to target customers that we think are good candidates for that product all at the same time. So it is very coordinated, and it's a cohesive message, which I think resonates well with customers as well. And you start doing the videos with that, et cetera. Yeah, I think today, to your point, I think we were on two different graphs, and now we're trying to combine them to one graph and have make that resonate, the peaks and valleys a little bit, what I call flatten the curve.
Yep.
Totally. And I think keeping your eyes and ears open to the industry that you're working in general, the industry that you operate in. So I used to work for a cybersecurity company. It's not always about pushing features through your messaging. It's about listening to the industry, what's going on. So there's a huge data breach going on. And this is an example of one of the things we had done. We not only reached out to customers who were affected by that breach globally, the ones that weren't affected, we just flipped the messaging to say, what if you were affected? And that's something that's not only going to work for your existing customers in terms of upselling and cross-selling them, making sure that the ones that were affected know that they have support, but also it's something that works for your prospects as well. So again, going back to my point earlier, how do you combine your sales, product, customer outcome, whatever led growth model with what works for the industry you're in and for your customers and prospects in your business? So I think it has to be the right balance of everything.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more piece to that. I think the product is very important because products are uniquely different. And for me, changing roles here a few times over the last few years and taking on this role, I can see night and day that certain products lend itself more to product-led growth and certain products don't. And it's okay. But to understand that is even more challenging. And for your sales leadership team, for your product marketing team, for your marketing teams, for your customer success managers, everyone needs to come together and agree that this is the strategy, that we can have more product-led growth or we need less of it, because not a single solution is going to be a solve-all for everybody because of that.
I agree, but also matters who your ICP or the target profile is, right? In the case of Slack, it was like the users, the power users who wanted to do collaboration, right? In the case of Cast, we sell to the VPs of customer success and CROs and CCOs kind of thing, right? So it's can it be PLG? Portions of it can be, but we're talking about like customer data, sharing it with your customers. So a CSM cannot just get started unless they are like blessed by the VP of CS or the CCO or telling them, yes, go ahead and like turn it out, right? So it also depends on the product. But the key thing is it should be extremely easy for the person who's using your product to like start using it. We talked about time to value. There's something else called perceived time to value. If you can show that there is going to be value, it's sometimes better for a VP than the CSM, right? So you have to like work in both those angles. And if it's very easy for them to use, get their job done fairly quickly without a lot of pain, the product will get adopted. The product has to be useful, right? That's a given. But you can hire like 50 CSMs and the product is not useful, they're not going to be able to drive adoption. So.
I'll comment on that, Dickie. And I came from a role, and I won't mention companies here. I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but where
I'll go look it up on LinkedIn.
Yeah, right. But I came from a role where it was, hey, let's have the product-led growth strategy. And oh, by the way, we're going to enable our customers in first time to value. All they need to do is watch these 10 videos. I'm like, wait a second. If they're watching 10 videos, you really need to, in my opinion, you really need to rethink your onboarding strategy and probably look at your product saying, we're probably either trying to do too much or the product's too complicated. One of the two is happening, and you've got to simplify things and really get back down to the basics. Because again, to your point, people want time to value extremely quickly. They want to click a few buttons, and if it's too complicated, they're moving to something else these days, especially in the SaaS market. Yeah.
I mean, nothing wrong with those, self-guided resources and videos, but you should not have to watch 10 of them. Maybe like watch like 2, 3, 4 minutes or something, get started. And like, when you get stuck, same thing, like, this company called Webflow, which is challenging like WordPress, right? And they're doing a really good job. They had lots and lots of videos, and then they pulled all the videos away and created these templates, right? You start with a template. What are you? I'm a physician. I want to create like a website for physicians and all this stuff. You pull in a template and everything is like filled in, right? So there are you can figure out a way to make it easy for the end user, and that's what you need to focus on, essentially.
Absolutely, and it could be. Go ahead, Aaron.
I was going to say, you break it up in those smaller steps for value. So yeah, Joe, add on to that. So.
And I think it has to be the right combination of methods of delivery as well. So if you've got videos, I think it goes back to thinking about what the customer, not what your product's ideal onboarding mechanism looks like, but think about it like the customer. If I have to go ahead and learn how to use Zoom, and it takes me more than 30 minutes when I'm going to be sitting in on 30 minutes, 1 hour meetings all day, it's not a win-win for me. So how do you combine, yes, self-serve videos work, but how do you combine those with virtual walkthroughs, and support on chat, or a dedicated onboarding that you could by all means sell if the customer needs it, offering more than one option, letting the customer choose what works for them. But most importantly, thinking of your onboarding, adoption, whatever customer journey stage cycle, beyond just what you think works for your product, also thinking like the customer to make sure that it's not too hard on them. Because we've got if I created Zoom, I think, it'd be very easy to use for me. But if the customer has to spend 30, 40 minutes using a tool like this, it's not valuable for them. So I think we have to think like the customer in those scenarios. The time that it takes for them to learn how to use your software, accelerate time to value, all those factors need to be taken into account.
Yeah, for sure. We do have another question in the Q&A, if that's okay. I know we're coming down. And if anybody has any questions, by the way, put them in the Q&A and we'll be sure to address them here. But Steve had a question that basically says, as part of PLG, do you find that users have an impression, maybe expectation, that PLG means almost a no-touch approach from CS, and that they're expecting a lessened level of support, and they expect questions to be answered on their own because it means a lot to be able to have a leaner CS team? If you don't mind, I'll comment on that, because I actually did a survey recently at Own Backup, and it was part of our NPS survey, but we also asked one other question about positives and negatives and what you would change and where do you think we should focus. And one of the things was, do you think we should build a community and invest more in PLG in different terms? And 2 responses did come back that said, by the way, that just means you're trying to lessen your support, or you're trying to do self-help, and you don't want us to have a CSM. And for me, so I think, to answer your question, I think some customers will have that expectation, or that knowledge, or thinking that that's the direction you're going. I made it very clear, reaching out to these customers directly, and I'm continuing to do so, where it will be a fine balance. Are we trying to enable you for self-help? The answer is yes. However, will we always have a human element that you can always reach out to a human very easily with one click? The answer is yes as well. So we will have both approaches, and we want to give, again, customers those choices of interacting with us, how they want to interact with us, and again, giving that option.
Absolutely. And I think I love that point about having accessibility to a human when they need to have it. That's why I think I love some of the other form of chat support in a digitally led model, so that whatever the customer is doing on their own, make it easy for them to find a human when they need to. And I think that's not only important because your customers need human interaction every now and then, it's also because, like I was saying earlier, it's humans that create these programs. These digitally led programs are not only created by humans, they continually improve through your human interactions. So I think finding a way to ensure that customers know that a human is there to help when they need it, but we also save them time through these self-serve models, but also feeding back that human interaction into your digitally led model to make sure that it improves and customers stop feeling like you're cutting down on costs or cutting down on human support, could be a factor.
Yeah, I think that is kind of solved, right? Like what you are saying is like, we'll provide you 24/7 support, even though the CSM is asleep, you can still, so you say like, hey, what is your question? The moment they start typing their question addressed to your CSM, oh, your CSM will be available shortly, but here are some answers. Does this answer your question? Like, Zendesk solved it like a decade ago. I think those are the kind of things people are putting in their product these days, right? Like basically, yes, you have a face of a CSM, you can click on and like start asking that question, but the product itself is stepping in and answering the question, right? And if they still think that they need to talk to a CSM, They do. I mean, we talk about deflection rates on Zendesk and all those kind of things. Same thing is happening within CS tools, embedded inside your website, inside your app. So that's pretty interesting. So
Here's something that you touched on, Vicky and Joe both, and it's interesting from my perspective. Again, my philosophy is we have about 6,000 customers plus or minus today at On Backup, and every single one I do send an email out to every single net new customer, and I give them my direct email address. And people are like, how are you going to scale doing that, et cetera? And it's interesting to see that. Number one, people don't think I'm going to respond because I send out this email and then they ask, hey, by the way, do this, and I respond to them personally, to every single one. It's really not that hard.
wow.
Now, depending on the product and depending on the scale, again, don't get me wrong, I get it. Everything's a little bit different, but people want that human interaction. And when they get it, they're actually very surprised at times that they do get it. So I believe that they should have access to me as well as anyone on my team. And again, if you want to have access to the self-help capabilities, we're going to enable that as well. And I'll keep talking about that.
The tricks of the trade are you write a you can use automation for what you're doing, but write a conversational email. Don't make it like customer marketing or acquisition marketing with lots of graphics and all that stuff, right? Make it very conversational, like how you would write to a friend, and without put your signature and all this stuff. You could still do that. And a lot of people do that. Hey, I'm available. Here is my Calendly. Just the fact that you're sharing that out, people appreciate that. Right. And I'm available to talk to you. And then you can limit the time on your Calendly to like maybe 2 meetings a day or something like that, create one. But it's a very good gesture to like have a VP reach out to hey, I'm available anytime you cannot reach support or you cannot reach your CSM. Right. So.
Yeah,
Exactly
absolutely.
true.
And I think we need to do away with no reply email addresses at some point. It's high time now. And I love that, Aaron, what you said about having personalized communication, even if it's not coming from you, because if you've got 10,000 customers, it's not possible for the VP of customer success to write to each one of them. But if your marketing team helps look like that email is coming from you and they've got a direct link to access your Calendly or respond to that email coming on your behalf, looking like it comes from you, I think those little things really matter in instilling positive emotions into the customer's mindset.
I'm going to push back gently and say that base it on your segmentation, right? Like if you, regardless of what kind of segmentation you're using, let's say you're using the ARR-based pyramid segmentation or using the needs versus risk kind of, how are you segmented? Maybe 80% of the customers you provide that to. There will be a few customers that are only paying you like maybe $5 a month or something that you do not have time to like send, and you send them resources, just-in-time resources, like, hey, click over here, this, that, and then maybe not share a reply to. So some thoughts. But yeah, for the people who are paying you enough, yes, share your email as much as you can. So.
Perfect. Well, I know we only have a few more minutes here. It's been a pleasure to speak to everybody. If there's any more questions, more than happy to answer them as we go along. I know we all believe in this. Dickie and Joe and myself were talking, and the team here before we started the webinar about personalization at scale. And really, that's the concept that we all believe in and that we're all pushing for. And I know that I'm going to stay connected with everyone here on this panel and appreciate the time. And Dickie, I may have to rely on you to look at the cast.
Yeah, and I was taking notes
as well.
I was like taking notes while you guys were like talking, so I always learn a lot from everyone who's in the industry. So,
perfect.
Yeah. So
Thank
somebody
everyone for joining.
Yeah.
Someone had a comment or a question.
No, Miranda just put that like Zendesk has a reply from that allows you to like, our product also has, like we usually say, send the email from the person that has the best relationship with the customer. It could be the CSM, it could be the account executive, it could be like the VP of CS talking to the C-level executive. So thank you, Miranda, for that.
Thank you so
And
much.
if you have a customer that doesn't like one of those people on the team, that's something we got to work on. Again, get back.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in the middle of your workday. And if you're in the Eastern time zone, I think you're almost done with your day, right? And happy holidays and great finds. Thank you to the entire panel. And please do join Preflight if you're not a part of it already. We host so many other discussions like this, but that's it for the end of the year. This is the last one. But happy holidays, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me.